السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. صلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So inshallah today we are taking another prophet from the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and looking at his story from among the program of Qasas al-Anbiya, the stories of the prophets. Today's prophet is Shuaib alayhi salam. Today's prophet we're going to be talking about is Sayyidina Shuaib. And I guess he's one of those prophets that people know his name but might not necessarily know a lot about him alayhi salam. And so today inshallah we're going to talk about some of the things that are associated with when he was sent, his conversation, his da'wah to his people, what he came to correct with his people, and the response to him alayhi salam. So Shuaib alayhi salam, if we want to talk about in terms of where he was sent or to whom is sent or the time period, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had mentioned in the Quran, he said, وَإِلَى مَدْيَنَ أَخَاهُمْ شُعَيْبًا قال يا قوم إني لكم نذير قال يا قوم اعبدوا الله ما لكم من إله غيره ولا تنقصوا المكيال والميزان إني أراكم بخير وإني أخاف عليكم عذاب يوم محيط ويا قوم أوفوا المكيال والميزان بالقسط ولا تبخسوا الناس أشياءهم ولا تعثوا في الأرض مفسدين بقية الله خير لكم إن كنتم مؤمنين وما أنا عليكم بحفيظ. So there's a few things that we want to talk about inshallah. The first thing is the time span where the Prophet Shuaib alayhi salam was sent, and to whom, right? So if you look at several verses in the Quran, quite often Shuaib is mentioned after Prophet Lut. Quite often Shuaib alayhi salam is directly mentioned after Lut alayhi salam. And there's 4 places in the Quran that directly mention Shuaib after Lut alayhi salam. And in fact, Shuaib later on, when he was warning his people, he was warning them as a punishment that is similar to the people of Lut alayhi salam. And so many of the scholars mention that Shuaib alayhi salam came after the prophecy, or Lut alayhi salam was sent as a messenger. Now, when we talk about who he was sent to, right? If you notice the first I mentioned, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَإِلَى مَدْيَنَ أَخَاهُمْ شُعَيْبًا, right? So this is the tribe of Madian. Good. Now the other verse that is very commonly known, this is where the difference of opinion comes in, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said, وَإِن كَانَ أَصْحَابُ الْأَيْكَةِ لَظَالِمِينَ وَإِن كَانَ أَصْحَابُ الْأَيْكَةِ لَظَالِمِينَ. And so over here, there's a group of people, it's called Ashab al-Aika, right? Ashab al-Aika. And the scholars have differed regarding to whom Prophet Shuaib was sent to. The first opinion is that Shuaib alayhi salam was sent to 2 different groups of people. They say that Prophet Shuaib is the only prophet that was sent to 2 different groups of people. The first were Madian, and the second, Ashab al-Aika. Now, where did they derive that opinion? When you look at the verses of the Quran, almost all of them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, say, Madyana akhahum Shuaiba, right? Akhahum, which means their brother, because every prophet is usually sent among their people. Except Ashab al-Aika, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, say, akhahum Shuaib. And so this is one of the evidences that this is 2 different people. But also they looked at the type of punishment that befell them. When we look at Ashab Madian, the punishment was فَأَخَذْتُمْ عَذَابُ الظُّلَّةِ, right? We're going to talk about dhulla, what it is. And then when we talk about Ashab al-Aika, it is as-sayha. So there's 2 different types of punishment. So they said these are 2 different groups of individuals, right? And so this is the first opinion. Now the second opinion, which is the opinion of the majority of the scholars, is that that Prophet Shuaib was sent only to 1 group of people, and they are the people of Madian, but they're also called Ashab al-Aika, right? They're also called Ashab al-Aika. Now al-Aika, what does al-Aika mean? Okay, first of all, let me do Madian first. Madian, where is it located? Does anybody know where it's located? Do you guys remember where Ibrahim alayhi salam was sent? Where did he reside after he left Iraq? Where did he go? Sham. Where? Palestine. Good. And Lut? Where did he go? Al-Urdun. Okay, good. Now, Madian is very close to where Jordan is. In fact, they say it's in Shem, and it's very close to Jordan. So, Shuaib A.S. was sent in that area of Shem, and it's very close to Jordan. That's why he reminded his people of the punishment that befell the people of Lut, because they're close by, right? And so this is one of the evidence. Now, the Prophet Shuaib A.S. So when we talk about Madian is it's kind of interesting, its location. It is really close to the Ard al-Shem. I shouldn't say it's in Shem. It is close to the Buhayrat Lut. And it's the edges of Shem on the way to Al-Hijaz, right? It is from Shem, but on the way to Hijaz, so it's considered one of the Arabian tribes. Okay, so this is actually an Arabian tribe, and Shuaib was considered from an Arabian lineage, and so he was sent to them. Now, Al-Aika, on the other hand, what does Al-Aika mean? Sheikh Muhammad, ما هي الأيكة يا شيخ? If I'm not mistaken, it is greenery, like green trees. These people lived in an area that was that had a lot of cropland, farmlands, right? And so, if I remember correctly, I have to double check this again. Is that al-aika? It refers that to things that are green, and so this is why they're saying it's the same. Madian al-aika is the same thing. Wallahu alam. If somebody can get on their phone, can double check, because I don't want to. This stuff is recorded, and I don't want to be recorded with wrong information. So, if you just Google Ashab al-Aika and see what al-Aika means. طيب. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He was talking about the people of Shuaib, He, subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentioned, let me backstep a little bit. Every prophet who was sent always called to the tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? But in addition to calling to tawheed and calling them to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they tend to always address some sort of a immoral behavior that is predominant among those people. So we talked about Lut alayhi salam. The predominant behavior is, unfortunately, illicit sexual behavior towards same genders, right? Some were like, other people, like Shuaib alayhi salam, they had an issue with what? أوفوا الكيل والميزان. أوفوا الكيل والميزان. They used to cheat. So their issue was more of an economical issue, right? Their issue was more something that it has to do with economics, the economical system. They used to heavily cheat one another, right? Whether either in selling or buying, right? They will either overinflate their product or decrease the price of the product they want to buy. And when they measure the scale, they would play around with the scales or volumes that they used, right? And so this was the issue of the people of Shuaib. So Shuaib alayhi salam, one of the things he came to address was that the immoral behavior of cheating, right? Of being dishonest when it came to business transactions. Did you find a definition, Sheikh? Same, right? Alhamdulillah. So one thing that had to do with we have to remember when we talk about, obviously when you cheat something, when you cheat in your business, is that halal money? No, it's not halal, right? This is something that you are robbing other from. And so whether you're buying or selling, whatever you're using, this is something that is considered a unlawful source of income that you're making. And subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had attached a lot of things that are associated with unlawful rizq. The least of it is the dua is not answered, right? That's the least of it. Now there's many other things, but this was apparently the predominant obvious situation, or one of the obvious, one of the immoral behaviors that was heavily practiced by the people of Shuaib. Of course, they also did not worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they worship idols, but I'm just saying many of the people, in addition, all the prophets called to tawheed, but in addition to calling to tawheed, they always came to rectify and correct some other immoral behavior in society, right? And this was their nature. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he told us about Shuaib alayhi salam, when he was addressing this, right, he mentioned two things that are like, two main things that are associated with the people of Shuaib, right? Business transactions. One is the right of the buyer, and the other one affected the right of the seller, right? The buyer or the seller, and both have both sides, right? And so this is why Shuaib alayhi salam, he said, فَأَوْفُوا الْكَيْلَ وَالْمِيزَانَ وَلَا تَبْخَسُوا النَّاسَ أَشْيَاءَهُم, right? أَوْفُوا الْكَيْلَ وَالْمِيزَانَ. أَوْفُوا, which means fulfill or complete, right? أَوْفُوا, which means give the rights of. Al-Kayl, Kayl is volumes. So the way you trade things, either you measure by volumes or you measure by weight. Kayl has to do with volumes. Mizan has to do with weight because it's a scale. He said, awfu, right? Give full due rights. وَلَا تَبْخَسُوا النَّاسَ أَشْيَاءَهُم. Al-bakhs, which means to reduce severely, right? To remove. هذا يبخس حق, which means to take away the right. Which means they remove or take away the things of others in terms of perhaps their value, okay? And so what they used to do is, when they used to trade, right, is when they would give somebody, so somebody's buying from them and they're weighing it or they're putting a volume, they would cheat in it, right? And so that is the right of the buyer. Now, when they used to take from somebody else, which is the seller now, what they used to do is completely, right, bring out everything that is negative about it to drop its price, even if it did not exist, right? So it's a way almost of like, a way of tricking others to make them feel that the value of their product is not what it is. Now, by the way, back then when they were trading this was the time of Shuaib alayhi salam, was before of like, they did not trade with money, right? It was not with money and silvers and gold and stuff like that. It was product for product, essentially, right? This is what they used to do. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He had informed us of the severity of cheating in those transactions. So, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَيْلٌ لِلْمُطَفِّفِينَ, right? وَيْلٌ لِلْمُطَفِّفِينَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا اكْتَالُوا عَلَى النَّاسِ يَسْتَوْفُونَ وَإِذَا كَالُوهُمْ أَوْ وَزَنُوهُمْ يُخْسِرُونَ, right? So المطففين, those who are that reduce, right? They take the scheme, right? They take away things. المطففين الذين إذا اكتالوا على الناس, when it's their right, right? The people are measuring for them. يستوفون, they completely take their right. وإذا كالوهم أو وزنوهم, but if they're the ones weighing, right? Volumes or scale, يخسرون, right? They'll reduce it, right? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, ألا يظن أولئك أنهم مبعوثون. Those people think or believe that they are going to be resurrected, right? مبعوثون ليوم عظيم يوم يقوم الناس لرب العالمين, to a great day where they stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So one thing we have to understand is when people cheat, so this is, I'm talking about now the whole aspect of cheating in business and bringing lawful, unlawful sources of income, is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described those people, He said, don't they know that they are going to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Right? أَلَا يَظُنُّ أُولَٰئِكَ أَنَّهُمْ مَبْعُوثُونَ. Don't you think that they're going to be resurrected? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pointing at a simple fact that there is a correlation between the iman of a person and his behavior. Right? The iman of a person and their behavior. Because the more iman a person has, the more they will try to correct their behavior. The less iman that they have, the more easy for us to cross that line. This is why the Prophet ﷺ, he would say, he said, لا يسرق السارق وهو مؤمن ولا يشرب الشارب وهو مؤمن. That the person who steals does not steal, that the thief does not steal while he's in a state of iman. Does that mean he's not a Muslim? No, it means that his iman is so low, he's not conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not thinking about the hereafter, not thinking about the fact that he is going to be held accountable for his actions. And so what he does is it enables them to commit that sin at that moment, right? Even some of the people who are actually, perhaps maybe righteous, when they fall into that sin, it's a moment of weakness, right? Yes, after that happens, they almost realize what happened, and then they try to obviously rectify their actions and repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But unfortunately, those who continue in their weakness of iman, they continue that behavior, right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pointing the fact that there's a correlation between those things. And so Shuaib alayhi salam, when he was sent as a messenger, part of his mission is to remind them of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? That they have to not take away people's rights. وَلَا تُبَخِّسُوا النَّاسَ أَشْيَاءَهُم, right? And so once again, this is, we're going to go back, this is the rights of the buyer and the rights of the seller. By the way, having, subhanAllah, haram rizq is not something that is simple or it's easy. And unfortunately, in the world that we live in, it happens easier than we think, right? Unfortunately. And because some of the pressures people indulge, and they think that they're pressured into having to do some of these things. And subhanAllah, some of the children, they spot it right away, right? So kids, for example, they'll always ask, like, we're going to a halal store, for example, right? And sometimes we go into the halal store and they see alcohol at the back and they ask, like, is this really a halal store, right? Does this, does it have halal meat really, right? And because in their minds, they're still young, in their minds, it's either black or white, right? It's either halal or haram. You can't have a mixed bag, right? That gray area does not exist for them. And so, subhanAllah, this is their nature, their pure nature is that they realize this is right and this is wrong. But as people grow, perhaps, it's those different pressures that make them, but this is the reality, right? The reality is sometimes that they fall into these patterns, whether the business transactions that involve a lot of interest-based interactions. And subhanAllah, the Prophet ﷺ had mentioned that there will come a time where everybody will be, will be affected by interest, and the one that does not directly interact in it, its dust will affect them, right? And subhanAllah, all I'm thinking is about our time, right? Whether we like it or not, no matter how much we try to keep, there's always an aspect of interest that does affect us one way or another, because that's the entire economy, how it's built. طيب. Now, the people of Madian, it is mentioned that they used to live in their town was by trade routes, right? They lived by trade routes. And so they would take that opportunity to always go into business interactions with those individuals. And it's a lot easier to take advantage of people coming from outside as opposed from people that are in town, right? And so this is what they would do, right? These people, these caravans, when they come on the business route, on the trade route, what they do is they would, either sell them overpriced products, and when they buy from them, they pretty much reduce the price of the products. And so this is one of the other things that they did, right? This is one of the other things that they did, they engaged in. So if you notice, a lot of business transactions. So if it was in their benefit, right, they would reduce it to buy it. If it's their benefit to sell, they would inflate the price. So there are many things. One of the reasons that obviously anything that is haram has severe consequences, right? And some of the consequences that have to do with unlawful income is, one, that it actually affects our souls. It affects the nafs itself, right? It affects ourselves. It affects our hearts. It puts a distance between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And obviously you mentioned it affects the acceptance of the dua. It even actually can affect the offsprings, right? Our lineage, our offsprings, it can actually affect them. When we feed our children from haram, whether we like it or not, they are affected. One of the righteous pious predecessors, one of the righteous females, she would give an advice. She would always, every day when her husband would leave to go about his business and his income, she would say, اتق الله فينا ولا تطعمنا من حرام, right? Have fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in us and do not feed us from haram, right? This is a righteous woman. And subhanAllah, sometimes we see the opposite. This is what I want. I don't care how you get it to me, right? I don't care who you have to murder. This is what I want. Bring it home. Right? That's the complete opposite of what we're supposed to build our households on, right? There is no barakah when there is haram coming in, right? And so this is why there was that heavy emphasis, right, and calling people into the right path. Other than the fact, of course, when this spreads into the community as a whole, it really does affect the entire economy, whether we like it or not. So it has greater implications than we think. And so Shuaib A.S, he said, فَأَوْفُوا الْكَيْلَ وَالْمِيزَانَ وَلَا تَبْخَسُوا النَّاسَ أَشْيَاءَهُم وَلَا تَعْثَوْا فِي الْأَرْضِ مُفْسِدِينَ. So those two things he talked to them, be just in your measurements. And then he said, وَلَا تَعْثَوْا فِي الْأَرْضِ مُفْسِدِينَ. Do not ta'thaw, which means do not spread corruption in the earth. And that has to do with what they used to do with those trade routes, right? Those people that they used to come to them. It had to do with that. And then Shuaib A.S. told him something interesting. He said, بَقِيَّةُ اللَّهِ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. Right? It's interesting how he described, he said, بَقِيَّةُ Now, بَقِيَّةُ over here is talking about what is remaining. And so he's talking about the halal, right? He called the baqiyya, which is what remains, he said halal. You know in Surah Al-Kahf, وَالْبَاقِيَاتُ الصَّالِحَاتِ, right? Same word. So the good that remains, the righteous actions that remain, because in reality, whatever is good is what will remain. Whatever is halal is what is going to remain. Even if it's little, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places barakah in it. So that's why Shuaib alayhi salam, he said, بَقِيَّةُ اللَّهِ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. Whatever remains, even how little it is, from what is halal, خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. It is better for you, right? And so, Shuaib alayhi salam, when he was making that da'wah to them, right, he was trying to direct them and correct their actions. Now, the last thing I'm going to mention regarding the da'wah, like, with this point over here, is how Shuaib alayhi salam directed his people, right? How he was trying to direct their people, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentioned that Shuaib, he told his people, وَلَا تَقْعُدُوا بِكُلِّ صَلَاةٍ تُوعِدُونَ وَتُصْعِدُونَ وَتُصُدُّونَ تُوعِدُونَ وَتُصُدُّونَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, right? So this had to do with what happened when Shuaib alayhi salam was advising, and we're going to come to this statement later on, when he was advising his people, he said, do not sit on the path, right? Threatening and preventing the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? This is when Shuaib started calling his da'wah, calling people to Islam, and some people accepted Islam. Their reaction was they got terrified. Anytime there's a da'wah to change something that people benefit from, and when something is wrong and they benefit from it, anytime you call to change it, what's going to happen? Are they going to accept it? There's objections, right? There's objections, obviously, right? Like, for example, the Prophet ﷺ, the people of Quraysh, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when the Prophet ﷺ called them to Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you have to remember, people of Quraysh were considered the center for what? The religious center and religious, economic, and Mecca, right? Mecca, trade center. Okay, good. Now, a lot of their trade was based on people coming for Hajj, right? Now, why do people come to Hajj? What are they worshipping? Idols. So people came to visit the idols around the Kaaba. Now, if we tell them Allah is one, remove the idols, do you see what's going to happen? What are they worried about? The economy, right? The Arabs are not going to come. This is part of the reasons why, for example, they were resistant to the da'wah of the Prophet ﷺ. This is part of, there's multiple things, right? Part of it was the arrogance, it was the Prophet ﷺ, the tribes they want to follow, the kind of aspect of economy, them fearing that they lose their religious position, multiple other things, but this is one of them, the aspect of the economy, that they're going to actually lose their pull to bring money in because people were visiting the idols, right? And so they resisted that. But similarly, like, many in the people of Lut, right? When the Prophet ﷺ told them, stop what you're doing, this is something that they're benefiting from, right? And why would I want to stop that? And so similarly, the people of Shuaib, when he told them, be just in your weighing and your scale in business transactions, of course they don't like this. So by default, what are they going to do? They're going to accept, right? So you guys are asleep today. Can we bring the chai early today, Sheikh? Are they going to accept? Alhamdulillah, good. Some of you are awake. Good, excellent. Jazakumullah khair. They're not going to accept, obviously, they're going to fight. And so what they did is they start threatening, right? And so this is say وَتُوعِدُونَ, right? وَتُوعِدُونَ, which means you start threatening others, and that's the default. Once you aren't able to engage in more, once you are defeated ideologically or defeated in terms of arguments, people always tend to resort to threatening and violence, right? That's what they resort to. And so they wanted to silence Shuaib in every way possible, right? And so they resorted to different means. And we're going to talk about how they reacted and responded. But we're going to look at first of how Shuaib alayhi salam, the different da'wah means that he took to call them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So what I wanted to look at is how Shuaib called them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how they responded, right? The arguments that they gave, okay? That the arguments that they gave to Shuaib A.S. Yes. That's true. But you know, whenever there's an economic crash, a lot of it has to do with the interest-based economy, right? They know that. It's not they don't, but obviously some people are benefiting from it. But it's unfortunate that even our Muslim countries, rather than establishing an Islamic system, they also indulge in that system, right? طيب. So if you look at the da'wah of Shuaib alayhi salam, how he called his people, I think we can broadly divide it into, like, 4 or 5 ways, or 4 or 5 things he did, right? The first thing he did is, in his da'wah, when he did his da'wah, he showed them evidences to the truthfulness of his message, right? And so this is called in Arabic burhan. Burhan, which is the evidence that you provide. And this is something that is very important, because every da'wah should be supported by evidence, right? And this is the first thing he did. Now, obviously, many of the prophets, one of the supporting evidences are the miracles that Allah Subhanahu wa Taala gives them, right? And if you look at the Quran, usually some of the scholars say that the miracles of the prophets when they're sent with miracles, they fall into 2 categories. A category that the miracle came without the questioning or the request of the people, and another category, the miracle came after the questioning or the request of the people, right? And they say, Shuaib seems to fall onto the second category, where the evidence comes after the people requesting it, right? But whatever the case is, we know that there's an evidence that he provided, because in the verse in the Quran, he said, وَقَدْ جَاءَتْكُمْ بَيِّنَةٌ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ وَقَدْ جَاءَتْكُمْ بَيِّنَةٌ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ. There has come to you a clear evidence from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And bayyina is something that is clear, okay? Something that is clear. Now, here's the interesting thing about clear evidences. If you think about it logically, clear evidences should be sufficient for people to accept the truth, right? Yes? But as human beings, we're very illogical. No, we're not, actually. I'm just kidding. We are logical, but there are other influences. So by that token, why is it that when evidences are presented, clear evidences, some people still don't believe? What I'm trying to say is, I want to take the example of Islam. Islam is not deprived until this day of evidences that prove its authenticity, that proves it's the correct Islam, that it's the authentic and final religion, that proves that the Quran is the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that proves that Allah exists, that proves that the Prophet ﷺ is the messenger. And we're not talking about one form of proof. There's so many that it becomes, when a person tries to remove all of them, they obviously look like a child that's trying to argue just for the sake of arguing, right? So once again, it's multiple forms of evidences all together, and so these are clear proofs. Yet people might not necessarily obey or accept, which means that people are not necessarily inclined or would accept something based on proofs. Not everybody is like that, right? But one of the things that he started talking about, Shuaib A.S., his first thing was to tell them and show them proof that is associated with his message. Now, the second way of da'wah he talked to them was that he reminded them of the bounties of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon them, right? And this is something that, many of the messengers remind the people of their tribe, right? The bounties of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon them. So how is reminder of a bounty or a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would make people obey Allah? Yeah. The question is how? Why would this be a way of da'wah? How does it work? Me reminding a person of the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, why would that make them want to obey Allah? Gratefulness, excellent, right? Gratefulness, but also realizing that those bounties come to you without you doing anything, right? In fact, if you think about the bounties of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا. If you try to enumerate and count the bounties of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you cannot count them. Okay? Now, one of the scholars had mentioned, he said, listen, if you sit there, he didn't say listen, but I'm just kind of using my own words. But the meaning of it, he's saying that if you sit down and try to write down all the blessings in your life, okay? And you write it. I was created, I was born, alhamdulillah, with full capabilities, full strength. I'm able to walk, see, hear, all these things, money. If you write them down, he said, if you're ever able to write all these down, know that there is many other bounties that are hidden they may not be aware of. For example, perhaps you were late or delayed, and that delay prevented you from being hit by an arrow or a bullet or hit by a car, right? How many times, subhanAllah, that we nearly something's going to hit us and it did not hit us. That certain business transactions that you did not indulge in, right? That they were going to cause your, you being broke. And so there's many other hidden blessings that you may not see. This is why you can never count the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. نعمة ظاهرة وباطنة. Yes. So these are the blessings that ظاهرة, that are obvious, وباطنة, and that are hidden, concealed, that you cannot see. Right? And so Shuaib A.S. was reminding them of these blessings so that perhaps that, they would remember. And one of the blessings he mentioned to them, he said, وَاذْكُرُوا إِذْ كُنْتُمْ قَلِيلًا فَكَثَّرَكُمْ. And remember when you used to be small in numbers, and then he made you increase in population. So here's the question though. Is increasing population something that is good? Wait, you said yes, why? You said yes, you shaking your head, you said yes. Okay, is more people a good thing? I'm seriously asking, is it a good thing? Well, you can argue logically, say, well, hey, he's reminding them of that bounty. It must be something good, even if I don't know what it is, right? But logically speaking, why in that time, why is having large numbers a good thing? Sorry? Good, excellent. Protection, anything else? Not just protection, but yes. Military power, right? Back then, strength was in numbers. You would never dare, smaller tribes would never dare attack larger tribes. They would never do that because that's pretty much suicide, right? The minute you do it, no matter how brave you are, all it takes is them to move and just overtake you. That's it. And so large numbers were considered something that is positive. In number, there was strength, military might, protection, but also economics, right? You can crop large lands, trades, whatever the case is. There's a lot of things that are associated with, back then, with large numbers that are important. Nowadays, because of technology, we think more of quality as opposed to quantity and all these things. That is still might have been correct back then, but the extent of it is not as obvious as it is now, right? Wallahu alam. But he reminded them, for example, of that bounty that they were small in number, and when increased in number, they had that power. So that is the bounty from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so he reminded them of them. Yes. So the Sheikh is telling me about the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where the Prophet ﷺ said, get married, تكاثروا, تناسلوا, right, which increase your offsprings. فإني متباهن بكم يوم القيامة. I am متباهن, which means expressing my pride in you on the day of judgment, right, on the day of judgment. So it is a sunnah to even though people tell you you should not have many children, and there's one is enough or two is enough. That's the perfect, a boy and a girl and a dog and a house with a garage, the American dream, right? No, in numbers there's benefit, right? Because without those numbers, the population is affected. Like a lot of the countries in Europe, for example, they're considered aging populations because the number of people that are going to replace the elders is not sufficient, right? Usually populations increase, but there's drastic starting to decrease in populations in Europe because of that call. And what's interesting is that the migrants, the people that migrate to those countries, slowly will overtake the native population, right? Wallahu alam. But anyway, it's back to our topic, right? So he reminded them, this is the second way he did da'wah to them. Now the third way he did da'wah to them was he reminded them of the consequence of what would happen if they disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by reflecting on previous nations, right? So he reminded them, of example, of Lut, right? So he said, وَلَا يَجْمَنَّكُمْ شِقَاقِي أَن يُصِيبَكُم مِثْلَ مَا أَصَابَ قَوْمَ نُوحٍ أَوْ قَوْمَ هود أو قوم صالح أو قوم لوط عفوا وما قوم لوط منكم ببعيد وما قوم لوط منكم ببعيد. And so he said, don't think that your hatred of me, right? Don't prevent my hatred of me. Don't let that, I don't think that this will not result into you being afflicted with what has afflicted the qawm of the people of Nuh, the tribe of Nuh, or Hud, or the people of Salih, and the people of Lut are not far away from you, right? Not far away from you. And so Shuaib A.S, he's telling them that you hate me, right? Don't let your hatred don't your hatred to me make you disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now this is something that's important, by the way. This is an interesting message in here. Shuaib A.S. is telling them, don't make this personal. Don't make this personal. Yes, you hate me. It doesn't mean Allah does not exist. It doesn't mean that the religion is not the right religion. Right? It doesn't work that way. So he said, don't let your hatred of me drive you to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Don't make this personal at all. It's all about the message, not necessarily the person, whether you like or hate them. Right? Of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always picks the best role models as messengers, and so really they have no excuse. They just hate the fact that He is ordering them to do something opposite of their desires. Right? But when you make it personal, you tend to lose track of what is right and what is wrong. This is a very important message. Sometimes we deny the truth because it comes from a person that we don't like. How many times have that happened, right? It happens a lot, right? SubhanAllah, sometimes, by the way, it's not necessarily a person you don't like. It happens a lot with parents and kids, by the way, and between spouses. So you tell the child, this is not good, do this instead. They will argue with you, right? Whole arguments for months. And then their friend would tell them, hey, don't do this, do this. Like, oh yeah, you're right. And then the kid runs home, mom and dad, I think I should do this, not that. My friend told me this, I think he's right. And they're sitting there we've been telling you this for months and you're fighting with us. We don't understand, right? And subhanAllah, the same thing happens between spouses, right? Whether it's the wife trying to advise the husband or the husband trying to advise the wife. SubhanAllah, it's almost they never hear it. And then they're sitting with their friends. They say it, they come back home, my darling, do you know this? We're going to do this, is good for us. And the other person's just going like this, SubhanAllah, I've been saying this for years. What happened, right? It's not necessarily, once again, hatred, but it's sometimes just the person. We don't accept something because of who it's coming from. And that's not the right thing, right? It is difficult. We'll be honest with each other. It is difficult sometimes, right, to separate, to be objective, to say, okay, let me look at it, right? Is it sound advice or not? Regardless of who's carrying it, right? And by the way, that happens a lot between Muslims, a lot. Right? Sometimes, even when it comes to fatwas or teachings of scholarship, sometimes we will not accept something because it comes from a certain sheikh that we don't like. But if the other sheikh says the same thing, you're like, oh, mashallah, subhanallah, may Allah give him barakah, so wise, all these things. We should be careful with these things, right? The people of Shuaib, Shuaib A.S. was warning his people to fall into the same thing, right? And so this is the da'wah from him. He's reminding them of the previous nations. He said, don't let your hatred of me make you disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Be careful, other nations that disobeyed their prophet were punished. Right? And so this was the third or fourth? Third. Sheikh, third. The fourth way, the fourth thing he did, the fourth way, methodology that he used, alayhi salam, is that he would use bishara wa nidara, right? Bishara wa nidara. Bishara, which is glad tidings. Nidara is warning. Okay? So he would give them reminders, glad tidings and warnings. Targhib and tarhib. And this is a methodology quite often mentioned and used in the Quran by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And all the prophets. This is why, for example, Jannah is mentioned and also the hellfire is mentioned. Anytime one is mentioned, the other one has to also be mentioned. There is a balance. This is our nature. Okay, this is our nature, that we need that balance. And Shuaib alayhi salam, he used that with his people, right? And we have to understand the shara of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala possesses it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who had created the human beings, understand what works with them best. If we continually always give, glad tidings, bishara, like targheeb, right? Encouraging people. Anna Allah ghafur rahim, inna Allah ghafur rahim, inna Allah ghafur rahim, inna Allah ghafur rahim. And we leave that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also has a severe punishment. What ends up happening? So if I constantly tell a person, don't worry, Allah is merciful, don't worry, Allah is merciful, don't worry, Allah is merciful, what's going to happen? Huh? They're going to fall into sins. They're like, Allah forgive me, right? It's all about the heart. Allah knows it's in my heart, right? Does that sound familiar? All right. Now, the opposite. Allah will punish you, Allah will punish you, Allah will punish you, Allah will punish you, Allah will punish you. You're going to go to hell, you're going to go to hell. What's going to happen? Not just run away from deen. It puts them in a state of despair, right? It's a balance. It's a balance. We need that, right? Whenever we are going to do something that is haram, we have to remember the punishments. Whenever we fall into sin, right, we have to remember the mercy, so we won't despair, right? It's that balance. That's not a hadith, Asha. It's not a hadith. I don't think it's a hadith, but it's a saying. It's a correct saying, right? The meaning is correct, right? There is no major sin with repentance, and there's no minor sin with insistence. Because when you insist on minor sin, it actually becomes accumulation. Allah Alam. Yes. Type. So where did Shuaib call his people to الترغيب? He said, وَاسْتَغْفِرُوا رَبَّكُمْ ثُمَّ تُوبُوا إِلَيْهِ إِنَّ رَبِّي رَحِيمٌ وَدُودٌ. Right? Ask for repentance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and return to Him. Tubu ilayh. My Lord, إِنَّ رَبِّي رَحِيمٌ وَدُودٌ. Right? Rahim, which is most merciful. Wadud has to do with more of an attribute of affection, right? Of love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this he was encouraging them to return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Of course, he had also reminded them, of the punishment. And so another verse, Shuaib A.S, he said, "Inni arakum bi khair, wa inni akhafu alaykum adhab yawmin muhit." I see this is the tarhib aspect, right, of warning them, right? He said, I see you in a good state. You guys are doing well. Alhamdulillah, there's wealth, whatever the case is. Inni akhafu alaykum adhaba yawmin muhit. I fear for you a punishment that will encompass you, right? Muhit, that will go over everything, right? So this is where he used that methodology. The fifth methodology he used with them to encourage them to accept Islam was that when it came to the situation of what to do, if some accepted and some did not, right? Some accepted and followed Shuaib and some did not, right? And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, He said, وَإِن كَانَ طَائِفَةٌ مِّنكُمْ آمَنُوا بِالَّذِي أَرْسُلْتُ بِهِ وَطَائِفٌ لَمْ يُؤْمِنُوا فَاصْبِرُوا حَتَّى يَحْكُمَ اللَّهُ بَيْنَنَا وَهُوَ خَيْرُ الْحَاكِمِينَ. So if a group of you believed in what I have brought, the message that I brought, and a group of you did not, then be patient until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala يَحْكُمْ بَيْنَنَا, judges between us, right? So what he's telling them is, even if some of us obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and others don't, we can still cohabitate and live in the same place until Allah judges between us. This is talking about coexistence. But coexistence does not necessarily mean that we accept each other's belief system. It doesn't mean that, right? I have my belief and you have belief. لَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينِ. You have your belief, I have my belief. Does not mean that we could not live together in harmony, right? I'll engage what I need to engage in. You need to engage you. I'm not going to oppress you. You're not going to oppress me. And this is how it was when he was calling them to that da'wah. If you look at this, essentially he's telling them, I'm not going to force you, right? I'm not going to force you. Here are the evidences. Targhib, tarhib. Like, remember the messages of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Beware of the punishments that befell before you. All these things he's telling them. And in the end, if they still don't accept and some accept, we can still coexist. This was the da'wah of Shuaib alayhi salam to his people. Now, on the other hand, right, how did they respond? Right, so their responses were quite interesting. Right? So they had several responses to the da'wah of Shuaib. Okay? And I want to look at these responses because you will always find them even until this day. So the first way they responded to Shuaib alayhi salam, they claimed that they don't understand. They claimed they don't understand, right? They said, قَالَ يَا شُعَيْبُ مَا نَفْقَهُ كَثِيرًا مِمَّا تَقُولُ. Right? Now, if we don't understand, how are we going to follow? It's as simple as that, right? It does not make sense. We don't understand what you're talking about, right? I have no clue. Just let me go my business. So it's a form of an excuse that they're using. But in reality, all Prophet's da'wah is very clear. It is very simple, right? But it's very interesting, the methodologies that they use as an excuses of why we're not following. Okay? لا نفقه كثيرا مما تقول. So, what was Shuaib calling for? Worshipping Allah, and then what else? Remember, what was he calling to? What was their issue? Being fair in their trade. Is there ambiguity in this? Is there something that clear about this? Did Shuaib speak in a different language? No, he did not. Right? Every prophet was sent to his people in the same tongue that they speak in. Right? For a reason, so that they can relate the message. طيب. This is the first excuse that they gave. Now the second they did was they, when essentially sometimes when it did not work, they claimed that Shuaib is in a weak social status. He was weak in his social status. He's of a lower social status. Okay, they claim that, right? وَإِنَّ لَنَرَاكَ فِينَا ضَعِيفًا. We see you, right? This is what they said to him. We see you among us, you are weak. So what does this have to do with the da'wah? Does this realistically have to do with the message of worship Allah? Does it have anything to do with it? Type. A person's strength or weakness in the social system. Does it take away or give anything to the da'wah in terms of its correctness or it's wrong? The message is the message, right? If it's right no matter who brings it. Right? And so a person's social status is not a evidence to whether something is right or wrong. And this, we need to understand this. Unfortunately, until this day, we're still influenced by that. When it comes from a person who is, a celebrity, or a celebrity does something, people are so quick to do what? Follow, right? Right or wrong, it makes no difference. If they do it, khalas, it's good. They're following it, right? But if another person who is from a lower social economical status, or whatever the case is, social status, does it, even if it's right, they don't follow. But Nuh alayhi salam, they said those who follow you are the weak, right? We are the noble class. Okay? طيب. The third thing they claimed afterwards, was they accused him of being bewitched. Being bewitched. إنما أنت من المسحرين. Okay. So why did they do that, right? So what they wanted to do is they wanted to just kind of dismantle or belittle or undermine the da'wah of Shuaib. Now, they can't find any sort of immoral behavior in Shuaib's character, okay? They can't find any sort of deficiency in the way he treats people. There's nothing wrong with that. They can't find any fault in the da'wah that he's making or the call he's doing. And so what did they resort to? Claim that he's possessed, right? They're possessed. So if you're possessed, then you must be also lying or out of mind, right? They accuse, I should say bewitched, or they themselves are magicians. So they either he's being bewitched or he's engaging in sorcery. Okay? Now the Prophet ﷺ himself was accused of, our Prophet was also accused of sorcery, right? إنه فكر وقدر فقتل كيف قدر ثم نظر ثم فقال إن هذا إلا سحر يؤثر. This is magic, right? And so this is not the truth, this is magic, you're tricking us, whatever the case is. This was one of the responses. So this is the third or fourth? Are you sure? The other response is that they used an excuse, or they claimed that how can we follow you, right? How can a messenger be a human being? How can a messenger of Allah be a human being? أبشر منا واحدا نتبعه, right? إن إذا لفي ضلال وسعر. أبشر منا واحدا نتبعه. Should one person, a human being that we follow? We see this in many, by the way, many of the arguments of the people of the messengers, the tribes of the messengers when they were sent. They will always ask, why did Allah not do this? Why would they send a human being? Why aren't they sending angels? Right? But أبعث الله بشرا رسولا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the messenger as a human being. Right? That's their excuse. But logically speaking, is there a reason why Allah would not send a human being as a messenger? Logically speaking. Is it impossible logically that Allah would send a human being as a messenger? Is it logically impossible? It is possible. Logically, it's possible, right? It is possible that Allah would reveal to somebody and send them. There's no impossibility about this. So why is it strange that they would send a human being? So this is one of the arguments that they gave. طيب. The other argument that they gave is when they were unable to, even all these excuses, they're still unable to go over the da'wah and things. What they started to do is they started threatening. Right? So this is the way they responded to Shuaib. One of the responses is that they started threatening Shuaib. Right? They said, لَنُخْرِجَنَّكَ يَا شُعَيْبُ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مَعَكَ مِنْ قَرْيَتِنَا أَوْ لَتَعُودَنَّ فِي مِلَّتِنَا. So they gave him an ultimatum. Right? If you're going to stay on your faith, we will exile you. Right? We will stone you and exile you, or return back to our faith. Right? So all the debates did not work. All their excuses did not work. And so they remember I mentioned this, they resorted to threatening. Okay? And so we know we know that Shuaib A.S. responded to that, how can we return after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had guided us and so forth. طيب. The other response that they did was claim that the da'wah that he brought is opposing to the faith of their forefathers. Right? What you're bringing does not conform with what we know. What are you talking about? Our forefathers. There's generations of this faith. How can we change it? Right? Why are you doing this? Why are you telling us to do things in a different way that we did it? And this verse, I have an interesting comment about this from one of the mashayikh when I was talking to him about this, or he kind of mentioned it. And so they said, قالوا يا شعيب أصلاتك تأمرك أن نترك ما يعبد آباؤنا أو أن نفعل في أموالنا ما نشاء إنك أنت الحليم الرشيد. So they're saying to Shuaib, they said, Ya Shuaib, does your prayer, right, صلاتك, order you that we should leave what we worship and our fathers? Or that we do in our wealth what we want? It's our wealth. Why can't we do what we want? Is this what's saying? And so because of this, by the way, I was talking to, I think it was Sheikh Muhammad al-Shinnawi, right? And we were talking about, what's the issue of people of Shuaib? He said, yeah, they're secular. Think about it. They were secular minded, right? Does your religion tell us not to do what we want in our money? Why can't we do whatever we want with our money? That's a very secular ideology, right? That you separate faith from our worldly interactions. That religion has nothing to do. Religion is between me and Allah in our household in the temple. That's it. This is where we leave it, right? But outside, why can't we do whatever we want with our business transactions? All these things. And so, subhanAllah, this is a very interesting kind of response of trying to say, why cannot we do it belongs to me? Why can't I do what I want? And by the way, we see this argument a lot, right? Whether it's from kids or older people or younger, especially in behavior, like, it's not affecting anybody. Why can't I do it? Well, you don't realize it's not affecting, yes, it is affecting people, right? Whatever it is. I'm not harming anyone, right? No, you are harming. And that excuse, by the way, is used a lot, right? I'm doing something that's not harming anybody. No, it is, right? If Allah made it haram, then it will result in harm, whether we like it or not, right? Whether it's immediate or on the long run. And so this was one of the responses too, but it's kind of interesting how they did it. They first praised Shuaib A.S, right? Telling him that you are that you are Al-Halim al-Rashid, right? You are forbearing, you are the wise, right? Does your religion tell us that we should leave our forefathers' faith and not be able to do what we want? Be smart about it. This is not how it should be, right? And so they tried to resort to this as one of their responses, right? Now, Shuaib A.S, right? Or one of the other responses also, and I should have put this with one of the threats, is when they said that, they said, or actually I shouldn't say that. It's prior to a threat, but in terms of how they valued things. And so they said, وَلَوْلَا رَهْتُكَ لَرَجَمْنَاكَ وَلَوْلَا رَهْتُكَ لَرَجَمْنَاكَ. If it wasn't for your people, your clan, we would have stoned you, right? And so the response of Shuaib A.S, he said, قَالَ يَا قَوْمْ أَرَهْتِ أَعَزُّ عَلَيْكُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ. Like, how do you weigh things? I should stop, right? I'm sorry. I get signals I should stop because they want people to drink their chai before their prayers. But I'm gonna say that you guys told me to continue. You guys want me to continue, right? Just say it. Alhamdulillah. Excellent. Huh? You can go after, inshallah. But you better run because the kids will probably finish it. All of a sudden, the prayer, the hallway and the prayer this time is going to be quiet. Why? They're all at the back drinking the chai and eating the sweets. طيب. So, what he's telling them, he said, look at what you're weighing, right? You're weighing my people on one side and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the other side. You favor my people. That's why you care about their opinion. You're not gonna stone me or do something, harm me because of that. And you're not worried about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like, you're worrying about the punishment from my clan and not the punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? He's telling them how you're weighing these things, right? 10 minutes, okay? We got 10 minutes. Until Iqamah, inshallah. Right. I lost my train of thought, ya Shaykh. The last thing I'm going to mention is how they responded, right? So in the end, right, khalas, they said, nothing is working. So they told him, right, فَأَسْقِطْ عَلَيْنَا كِسَفًا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ إِن كُنْتَ مِنَ الصَّادِقِينَ, right? So let from above us, parts from the skies fall upon us if you were honest. So it's kind of interesting. They were challenging Shuaib A.S. They said, if you're truthful, then let a punishment happen. And they dictated what kind of punishment it is, right? And they dictated one. It's very challenging, right? So this was the response. And obviously after that response, this was the end of it. That's it. So these are a group of people that are not willing to accept the da'wah of the Prophet or follow him. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informed Shuaib of what's going to happen. And so this is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, he said, فَأَخَذَهُمْ عَذَابُ يَوْمِ الظُّلَّةِ إِنَّهُ كَانَ عَذَابٌ يَوْمٍ عَظِيمٍ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what he said was he sent a very strong heat, right, upon the people of Shuaib. Like, really, it was hot. And for days it was hot. And people just could not bear it anymore. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent a cloud at the periphery of the village. And so when they saw that cloud, what they did was they all exited because it's just hot. And so they wanted to go underneath some sort of shade. They left their homes, their houses, went to the outskirts of where this cloud is, and they stayed underneath it. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, once this happened, He sent upon them a fire that annihilated all of them. Right? From that cloud, a fire fell, and it removed and it killed all of them, except obviously the believers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had saved Shuaib and those who had believed with them. This is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, فَأَخَذَهُمْ عَذَابَ يَوْمِ الظُّلَّةِ إِنَّهُ كَانَ عَذَابَ يَوْمٍ عَظِيمٍ. Right? Yawm al-Dhulla is the day where the al-Dhulla, which is the cloud that came, that day when it came, this was a day of severe torment and punishment. Right. We'll stop here, and we finish the story of Shuaib alayhi salam. If you have any questions, we'll take it inshallah. Yes. Mm-hmm. So here's when you say these people are logical, are they really logical though? So here's the thing. If they believe that Allah is the creator and He blesses them and gives them bounties, right? And then there is punishment and non-punishment and then reward, all these things, is it logical to continue to disobey Allah? Right? Is it logical to believe that those bounties will be blessed? Or that Allah would not punish them and take it away from them? Right? It's not very logical. But what it is subhanAllah, it's a weakness of the individual and unable to conquer their desire. Because wealth is a very strong desire. Right? Right? That they was adorned for the people, the love of certain desires. Among them is right? Loads of silver and gold. So wealth is one of the things that we're drawn to. And when somebody has a lot of them, a lot of it, and risks losing a lot, it becomes very difficult. Right? It's different than a person who's, subhanAllah, poorer. They're like, I'm not going to lose much. Right? But when these individuals, they're not willing to sacrifice that for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And those do exist throughout time. So what are you going to do to them? Right? All we're responsible for is to give the da'wah, and that's it. That's it. And we make dua for them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala change their hearts. But hopefully, inshallah, like at one point or another, they're going to realize sooner or later that this is not worth it. Okay? Now, there's of course a difference between accepting Islam and staying out of haram. So if we're talking about people who are who are non-Muslims that don't accept Islam because there's certain things they don't want to leave behind, then it's better to tell them accept Islam and just sin. It's better for you, right? It's more logical, that you would eventually enter Jannah, accept Islam, right? Just come into Islam and know that this is a sin, right? Nobody's going to tell you, khalas, you're going to act in sin, but at least be a Muslim so you can have salvation in the hereafter, right? Now, it's a Muslim in the first place, then all you got to do is just continue kind of bothering them, right? Al-ma'ruf nahi al-munkar, right? What you're doing is haram, they're doing bad. Of course, they're not going to like you for it. They might kind of start blocking your number or whatever the case is, but once a larger part of the community starts addressing them, they will feel that pressure. Allah. Okay. Any more questions? Al-Aika and Madian. So I said there's two opinions. One opinion is that the Prophet Shuaib was sent to two different groups. And another opinion, which is the opinion of the majority of scholars, that they're actually the same group, it's just they have different names. Right? No. They're not both groups. They're one group. They just have two names. Right? So that I went with the opinion of the majority of scholars. That it's not two groups, it is one group, but they just are named two different things. Right? Allah A'lam. You want to make adhan? Who's going to make adhan? طيب.